What's up? Welcome back. In this episode, we're going to talk about how you can use the Orbit API and the dev.to API. And we're going to write a little bit of Ruby code to take our blog posts or articles that are being posted on dev.to and ingest them into Orbit as activities. So if you're not familiar with Orbit, it's sort of like a CRM for developers. It's a really interesting way to sort of track activities that you might want to engage with a certain community or interact with certain developers that are in a certain space. So it's kind of like a CRM that's specialized for developers and for developer community. And then dev.to is this platform where you can write blog posts. And what I want to do is import those activities from the blog posts into Orbit as sort of like actions that a developer has taken. So let's walk through that process. There are many official integrations that Orbit supports, but the ingestion of articles is from dev.to is not one of them. So we're going to make a new workspace name. We'll call it demo dev.to, and we're going to say create workspace. This creates a workspace inside of Orbit that we're going to use just for this demo. Now we could hook up a bunch of different integrations. One of them is, I don't know, this says like ring the bell. I guess that'll say notify me when it's ready, but it's not officially ready. So what we're going to do is build one from scratch. And so we can go to the API tokens section and we can create a new API token. This is going to be, I don't know, our demo API token for, actually it's going to be like dev.to importer. The name that you use here is important because that's going to show up in some parts of the UI. So we'll look at our dev.to importer. I'm going to copy the API token for Orbit. And then let's just make a new directory called dev.to or like orbit dev.to. And we'll cd into orbit dev.to, and I'm going to say bundle init to start a brand new gem file. I'm going to say bundle add REST client because I'm going to use the raw Ruby REST client gem. I'm also going to add bybug in case we need to do any debugging, and there might be other stuff that we need to add later, but I'm also going to create a new file. We're just going to call it run.rb. And in here, you know what else we want is probably to load from .env. So let's say bundle add .env. And let's create a .env file where we're going to say orbit secret is the secret that we just copied. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is open up our run.rb and say require .env/load. That's going to open up our .env file and load it. Let's also require REST client, and let's start implementing a little bit of how we might interact with Orbit and dev.to. So it's going to be something like this. We're going to say, fetch the articles from dev.to, and then we want to, for each article, create a new activity inside Orbit. So I guess the other part of this is that we need to go over to dev.to. We're going to go to our account settings, and then under extensions, we can scroll down, and there is an area where we can generate an API key. So we're going to say, let's see, extensions, API, generate API key. So we're going to call this one demo, and I'm going to say generate key. We're going to open this up, copy the key there, and come back over to our env file or .env file. We're going to say this is our dev.to secret. Okay. The other thing we're going to need for Orbit that I forgot about is our workspace. So in the very beginning, recall that we created a workspace. This is going to be the name of our workspace. It's sort of like the slug in the URL there. So demo-dev.to. So I'm going to put that in the env file also. Okay, so fetch the articles from dev.to. So that's going to be like the first step that we need to create. So I'm just going to do some like fantasy-driven development here and just imagine that I had a dev.to client. I don't think there is an official one. There might be a Ruby client, but it's really tricky to search for. And so I'm just going to say client is dev.to.new, and I'm going to pass in env, dev.to secret. So that's going to be how we sort of initialize the client. And then we'll say something like client.articles.each do article or something. And then for each article, what we want to do is like create a new activity inside of Orbit. So in order to make this part work, we need to go build a client for dev.to. So I'm going to add a new Ruby file here called dev.to.rb, and I'm going to create a new class called dev.to that is initialized with the API key. We're going to store that in an instance variable. And we're probably going to want like a base URL. I don't remember what that is. Let's take a look at the dev.to dev.to developer API. So like dev.to is actually just like the domain, but it's really built by forum. So we need to find the dev.to. Here we go. How to use the dev.to API. Okay, so right, yeah. So you can just use like dev.to/API. Let's see if this gives us documentation or anything. Yeah, okay. So dev.to. So here, let's say we want to fetch the articles. We want to list published articles. So this is going to be our base URL is dev.to/API. So we're going to come back over here. We're going to add our base URL. And then let's make a method here called articles. That's going to take in some params. And what we're going to do is call get, which again is fantasy driven. Get is going to take in a path and params. And get is going to go to /articles with params. And get is just going to call rest client.get URL param, or URL, yeah, just give me the URL. And then we'll use params to build up a query string for a URL. So here we'll say base URL, and that concatenated with the path, and we'll drop on the query string at the end. So params.toQuery, I think toQuery might come from active support. So that we're going to get a response back from REST client, and then we'll probably want to return json.parse the response.body. So yeah, for now, what we could do is like use rspec and do some testing and whatever, but I'm going to be super lazy here and just say like pry require / I don't know, dev.to, and then say dev.to.new test. And then that's going to give us a client. So c equals _ c.articles. Undefined method toQuery for hash. Is it it might be toParam. toParam. Reload. Oh. Okay. Require. Okay. There is no. Okay. So I think what we need to do is import require active support /all bundle add active support. Active support just has so many helpful things from Rails, but you don't need all of Rails if you're running just like a simple little Ruby script like this. So let's exit again, open up pry require /dev.to. C is dev.to.new test c.articles and uninitialized REST client. Okay, so we need to move this to dev.to. Exit. There's probably a better way to do this. Actually, there is. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just add like a little test harness thing down here. So we're just going to say client is dev.to.new test client.articles. So then we can say Ruby or Ruby dev.to. And okay, so it didn't spit anything out, but I'm guessing we're going to have some sort of error or exception. Oh, wow. We didn't even need an API key for this. Okay, so that's cool. So, all right, so then in that case, yeah, I guess we don't even need an API key. That's fine. But that gives us back the articles. So that's great. And we could even like iterate over them, or we could say articles.first, and that should give us the first article. And it does. Okay, so we have the type of the post, and it's an article. It has the ID. It has a title, description, etc. So we're going to take this data, and we're going to use it to make a request over to Orbit to create an activity. So here we need to like create the activity. It turns out there is a Ruby gem for Orbit activities, and it's called like Ruby orbit activities. Okay, so let's add this gem, orbit activities. So we're going to say bundle add orbit activities. Yeah, I guess if we're not creating any articles, that would make sense that we don't actually need that Ruby, or that we don't need an API key. So we're going to say require orbit activities. And here, there is an example activity for creating a new activity right here. So we're going to say orbit activities request.new. And the API key is going to be env orbit secret. And the workspace ID, this is going to be our env orbit workspace. It's going to be a new activity, and then the body of the activity ends up being some data that we're going to send, and it's based on the API reference for Orbit. So orbit.love/reference. Oh, it's docs.orbit.love/reference. It'd be cool if orbit.love/reference just automatically redirected to this. Okay, so activities, this is what we want to do. We want to create a custom or content activity for a new or existing member. So if you already know what the member's ID or the member's slug is inside of Orbit, then you can create a custom or content activity for a specific member. But if you don't know what the details of the member, you can just pass in your workspace slug and then create a content activity passing in details about the member, and that will like sort of associate with an existing member based on their name, GitHub handle, Twitter handle, email, LinkedIn, etc., etc. So we're able to kind of like back into what the right member is. We need to pass in the URL and occurred at activity type, and then details about the member. So if we went over here and grab our workspace slug and then come back to the API ref, that's what's going to go here. And in fact, so we've already got that. And then the body is going to look like this. So we're going to have the URL. Okay, let's just start constructing the body here. So we're going to say URL is something, occurred at is something, and then we have the member, which is going to have some stuff. And then there is the activity type, which is content. And then details of the member. We have, what else do we have? We have the bio, birthday, company, title, location, name. We will have name. What else do we have? We maybe want to add some tags. So we can say tags to add. Might be something like dev.to author or something like that, so that we can look up all of the dev.to authors. We might plop in their GitHub, Twitter. If we have their email, we would put their email, and we have their dev.to name. And then we also want to put in some information about the identity for where we learned about this person's information and profile. So we're going to say identity, and this is going to have the name of the person again, the source, which is going to be dev.to, and we might also have things like their username, UID, username, etc. So we don't actually have the UID or anything. So if we look back at this article, what do we get from this article? Well, we do have a user key here, and that user has a name, has a username. It also has the Twitter username and GitHub username. It also does have the website URL. So let's start going through and adding this. So we're going to have article URL. Occurred at is going to be article published at. The member's name is going to be article user name. GitHub is going to be article user GitHub. I think it's GitHub username. Let's see. Yeah, GitHub username. And I think Twitter is going to be the same, except this part turns to Twitter. And dev.to is article user username. This one is going to be the same name, and this is going to be username. All right, so this should actually make the request to create a new article. So let's just put some little logging here. Puts like uploading new article to dev.to or to orbit, and then maybe we'll put like articles title or something, and that should give us a little bit of output about what's going on. And yeah, okay, so we're going to say Ruby run and just see what happens. Uninitialized constant dev.to. So we're going to require /dev.to. Oh, the other thing is we don't want all the articles. We just want specific articles. So we want to pass in some params here. So username cjav dev. Let's only try to find my own articles, at least initially. Okay, cool. So we got this output. It said uploading new article to Orbit. This is like a recent articles that I wrote. But then we get this message down below that says undefined method byte size for hash. And it's somewhere inside of that Orbit activities thing. And it turns out that this body here, like the content that we send to it, needs to be a string. So we're going to say to JSON. So if we say Ruby run again, then now we see uploading new article, uploading new article. So now if we head over to our workspace, our Orbit workspace, we can go to members. It should show me, and look at that. Okay, so now my dev.to content is populating inside of Orbit. So that is how we can wire that up. Now, you might take this little Ruby script and wire it up inside of GitHub Actions or something to run. Maybe you run it once a week so that it just sort of like ingests all of your articles. But yeah, I thought it was kind of like a fun little exercise in connecting these two APIs. Orbit does have a CSV upload, but I couldn't figure out how to make it work with the content article type specifically. So yeah, hopefully this was useful. This is a pretty common little task where you might want to like take data from one API, put it into some other API. They don't have a default integration, so you might just wire up a quick Ruby script and let it run. Obviously, like I had a few swags at this when I was first testing it out, so hopefully I helped you avoid any of those issues. Yeah, this is like really fun ways to use Ruby to script out little sort of automated tasks. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.